Hello everyone, Pat here with another video, and you guys all voted for her, so I'm here to deliver on arguably the most annoying character to fight in all of Epic 7, Tempest Surin. As with all of my how to play videos, I'll be going super in depth discussing her stats, skills, endgame equipment build suggestions, as well as some pointers on what to use and what to avoid in World Arena if you guys are into that thing. Before I get into the actual video, if this video helps you guys out at all, please consider leaving me a like or a subscribe. Helps me out a ton. And with the intro out of the way, let's move on to Tempest Surin stats. Tempest Surin is a 4-star light thief of the Gemini zodiac symbol. She shares a stat line only with her fire counterpart, Surin. Looking at her stats, she has 1010 attack, 5,097 health, 117 speed, 497 defense, 27% critical hit chance, 150 critical hit damage, 5% dual attack chance, 12% effectiveness, and no effect resistance. Tempest Surin's stats overall are very good. She boasts decent to high speed as well as very high critical hit chance. The only stat I feel that she is lacking in is attack. It's a little bit low compared to some of the other 4 stars. As a fun fact before we move on to the skills, Surin is voiced by Haviland Stillwell, who voices Mirsa as well as Cezanne in Epic 7. She also makes a cameo in the English dub of Devil May Cry 5. Tempest Surin's S1 is Lunge. It has a 1x multiplier and a 35 to 50% chance to inflict bleed on the target for 2 turns depending on Molagora. Also, the damage of this move is increased by 0.15% for every 1% health Tempest Surin is missing. At best, when you're at 1% health, this move is essentially dealing 1.15x damage. That's great, but it's not as good as some of the 1.2x single target damage S1s that we see on some of the best DPS in the game. Excellent, just not the best. Her S2 passive is Swift Movement. This passive is absolutely nuts and is the main reason why Tempest Surin is considered so good and is so widely played in the current meta as of the filming of this video. She cannot take more than 51% of her max health in any one attack. When her health is 70% or less when an enemy ends their turn, it dispels all debuffs from her and grants her stealth for 1 turn. Additionally, she increases her combat readiness by 20 to 30% depending on Molagora, and that skill can only trigger once per turn. So, this basically means that your Tempest Surin is going to be difficult to hit due to stealth. She is going to take a lot of turns due to the CR push. You can't really control her because she is constantly cleansing herself, and because she cannot take more than 51% of her max health in any one attack, you can't kill her in one hit. So she is good against control, she is good against cleave, and she does respectable damage on most of her moves, which is why people really like this hero. This passive is even more insane than you were probably thinking as well. You're thinking 51% means that it takes 2 hits to kill her. Well, what if I told you that Swift Movement also stacks with barriers and damage sharing effects such as Aureus? If you have a barrier that is roughly 30% of her health, after they chew through the barrier, they can only do 21% of Tempest Surin's HP bar. That means that it takes 3 hits to kill her. If the Aureus reduces the damage even further, it might take as many as 4 hits to actually kill a Tempest Surin. Really insane passive. I would say this is one of the best passives in all of Epic 7. Tempest Surin's S3 is Moonlight Shadow. It has a 3 to 4 turn cooldown depending on Molagora and gives you 2 souls. It has a 1.05x multiplier. It has a 60 to 85% chance to inflict unbuffable to all enemies for 2 turns, as well as silence them for 1 turn. This move also has its damage increased by 0.2% for every 1% health that Tempest Surin is missing. This is a slightly higher than average multiplier for an AoE, and at its lowest health total, this thing is essentially hitting at a 1.25x multiplier, which is excellent. Speaking of a 1.25x multiplier, that is how much you can expect from her soul burn. The damage is slightly less than the damage increase you would get from other AoE soul burns. Usually you're going to get a 0.25 increase, but this one is only a 0.2 increase. But that's fine when you consider the higher than usual base damage on the move, as well as the fact that it does more damage the lower health she's at. At its best case scenario, this thing is essentially hitting like an Arbiter Vildred S3. And if you have greater attack buff on this move, you can kinda understand the hype on a certain artifact choice. When it comes to Molagora priorities, max S3 Moonlight Shadow first because it offers a wide variety of benefits, including a decreased turn cooldown, extra chance to land unbuffable and silence, which are two amazingly good debuffs in this game, as well as the bonus damage to her hardest hitting move. After that, I would max the S2 Swift Movement because it cycles her turns faster. Since this move can only proc once per turn, you are vulnerable if you cannot cycle quick enough to get it back up. After that, it's the S1 simply for the effect chance and the damage. As with all damage dealers, you guys already know I say it in every video, plus 15 or else. Much like with Arbiter Vildred, Tempest Surin's passive almost guarantees she won't die immediately before she gets at least one turn. Knowing that it will take 2 or more hits no matter what her stats look like to kill her, we can forgo almost all defensive stats in favor of straight offense. This also has an additional benefit. Since she'll be squishy, she will constantly be low on life, which means she naturally will be doing higher damage due to the increased modifiers on both her S1 and S3. Her S2 passive Swift Movement is also pretty aptly named. The massive combat readiness boost the move provides when it triggers means even medium to slow builds for this character will cycle turns pretty quickly. Therefore, speed set isn't really as important on her as it would be on several of your other damage dealers. And since this passive also has a self-cleanse, she doesn't need to worry about having an immunity set either. This leads us to the natural conclusion that lifesteal crit is, for most players, the best way to play her. Her increased damage on low health also means that more health will be returned due to the lifesteal set, which puts her above 51% in most cases, which allows you to start the cycle over and over again. This setup makes it incredibly difficult for most players to deal with Tempest Surin, and it's for this reason that I highly recommend that you play it. Barring a hard counter or a ton of AoE effects on the enemy team, lifesteal nearly guarantees your Tempest Surin will get a ton of mileage, as she's most likely not dying unless she's the last person left standing. With that out of the way, let's take a look at the stats. As you know, we're going to be on lifesteal crit. We want 3,600 attack, 807 defense. This is her default defense with an I-90 body. You can go higher on defense if you want to take less damage per hit, but I find that the stats are better allocated elsewhere. 8,348 health. Again, this is literally her base health with an I-90 helmet. 185 speed, 100% crit chance, 280 crit damage. You can go higher on the attack and crit damage if you are looking to do more damage. I have seen as high as 3,900 attack, as well over 300 critical hit damage. Taking a look at the right side gear, we want a critical hit damage necklace, attack percentage ring, speed boots, and for the artifact, I prefer Alexa's basket. However, you can play whatever you want. There are a large number of choices that are all viable on Tempest Surin. Alexa's basket is particularly good because when she's on low health and you proc the greater attack buff, the damage from her S3 ranks up there with Arbiter Vildred. This is why it is my personal pick, because it can cleave through an entire team. Looking at the other stuff, Moonlight Dreamblade is also an excellent choice because it is, and as my friend puts it, great at messing with the math. Instead of taking 2 or 3 hits to kill your Tempest Surin, it may take even longer to kill her if they proc the dodge, which, is pretty good, and then it gives you an attack buff to boot. So it also can mess with specific hard counters, such as top model Luluka, if they are not playing Symbol of Unity. So if they are playing something like, Dignisorb, and not Symbol of Unity, the Moonlight Dreamblade can actually surprise them, and they might end up losing the game because they thought they were going to kill Tempest Surin, and instead they ended up just helping you by CR pushing you right to the front. Portrait of the Saviors and Symbol of Unity are great options for players who either do not have Alexa's basket or who have their Alexa's basket on another DPS. Finally, with the buff to Shepherd of the Hollow, it is very similar to Moonlight Dreamblade. If you are drafting your Tempest Surin with an attack buff for every game, then this is a great option. Otherwise, you will be doing roughly 5 to 10% damage less than if you had played Moonlight Dreamblade, so keep that in mind. Taking a look at the average piece for the character, you're going to need something around 25% attack, 10% crit chance, 12% crit damage, and the last stat I would highly recommend either be speed or flat attack. I feel like for most players you will need a lot of flat attack on pieces with attack percentage in order to hit your goal. The next build I'm going to talk about is the anti-cleave build on a speed set. Keep in mind, this is not a general use speed build. Typically, the speed set builds that players are using on Tempest Surin are very similar in stat lines to the lifesteal build. So if you want to play a general use Tempest Surin, simply copy the lifesteal stats but make it on a speed set. This is a build that is specifically for players that want to either take first or second turn against control and cleave teams and reverse cleave them or reverse control them. Looking at the actual build, we are on speed crit. We have 3,300 attack. This is the lowest number that you would need in order to kill a team of 900 defense squishy opponents if you were to have an attack buff or a greater attack buff from Alexis Basket or Moonlight Dreamblade. So that is where we get that number. No change to the defense or health. 260 speed or better if you can manage it. This is, again, a build that is trying to take the first turn or take the second turn with the help of the S2 passive. So we need to be blazing fast. Thankfully, Tempest Surin has 117 base speed. This averages, by the way, out to 14 speed per piece average. So keep that in mind. This is not exactly a newbie-friendly build. 100% critical hit chance, 250 critical hit damage. The effectiveness I have at 0, but if you are trying to really shoot for those unbuffables and silences, by all means pump this stat up. Looking at the right side, nothing has changed. Crit damage necklace, attack percentage ring, speed boots, same artifacts. Looking at the average piece, we need 17% attack, 14 speed average like we talked about before, 10% crit chance, and 6% crit damage. For teammate suggestions for Tempest Surin, the most important things that you can ask for are characters that have damage, share passives, or can hold the Aureus artifact, as well as barriers. So when you think of those two things, the most obvious one, even though she is an ML 5-star, is Fallen Cecilia. Yes, I recognize, again, it is an ML 5-star, not everyone has her, but I feel like I would get chewed out in the comments if I do not mention how insane the synergy is between these two units. Fallen Cecilia is arguably the best Aureus holder in the game, as well as provides some of the best barrier protection in the game. For those of you guys who do not have Fallen Cecilia, you can consider a character like Troublemaker Crozet holding the Bastion of Pelusia artifact. Bastion of Pelusia provides you a barrier at the start of the fight, and he has a very strong damage share passive that you can use to protect your Tempest Surin. Another character to consider is General Purgus. He gives an attack buff, which is really nice for the damage on Tempest Surin to begin with, but his passive punishes people who play a lot of AoE attacks, and AoE characters are naturally very good counters to characters that constantly go in stealth, such as Tempest Surin, so consider playing this character as well. The final character I want to talk about is one that you may not expect, and that is actually Rowana holding the Stella Harpa artifact. The hardest counter that Tempest Surin has in the entire game is Archdemon Shadow, which we'll talk more about later on. But one of Archdemon Shadow's worst matchups is actually Rowana holding the Stella Harpa artifact. It makes it very difficult for the Archdemon Shadow to actually kill your Tempest Surin, and your team will benefit greatly in the process, not only from the strips of the seal, but also the constant S2s from Archdemon Shadow will CR push and heal your whole team, thanks to Rowana's really powerful S2 passive. Much like we talked about in the Ilanav video, Tempest Surin falls into a similar category. She is good against specific types of comps, more so than specific characters. She is great against cleave teams that are using a lot of squishy DPS that are seeking single target kills. So for this reason, she's good against things like an Arbiter Vildred cleave, because he will not be able to one-shot her, and she'll easily be able to kill him, lifesteal back up, and then survive the descending blade that comes afterwards. She's also good against a thing like Challenger Dominion, because again, cannot one-shot her, so you can essentially then just freely S3 and reverse cleave the Challenger Dominion. She's also a decent answer to stealth heroes. Think of rangers that are on Guiding Light, such as Landy or Operator Sigrid. She also is a decent answer to Spectre Tenebria. A well-timed soul burn with a greater attack buff can mean an instant win and absolutely kill the character outright. And then also the Spectre cannot instantly kill you with a soul burn into S3 like she can with some other damage dealers, so that is a huge boon to you. But the longer the fight goes on, I feel like the more it is in Spectre's favor. There's a lot of RNG there that allows the Tempest Surin to steal some wins which is why I feel like a lot of people play her, because you can get lucky and win the game, but she's not really a truly good matchup. Speaking of other things, she's not a truly good matchup against she is good against control heroes. Think of things like Dizzy or like a Sage Ball and Saison. She is decent in those matchups, and she can be a decent answer versus things like Fairy Tail or Bazaar, but the characters with the unbuffables will really hinder your damage output, and they may not do enough damage to actually trigger the passive, which means you may still fall prey to getting cleaved or controlled by them. So again, decent option versus a lot of things, which is why I feel like a lot of people like Tempest Surin. She's not amazing in a lot of situations, but she is a solid answer in quite a number of scenarios. And I feel like for players that don't have a super deep box, that is a-okay. Again, not the best answer in any given scenario, but she is great in a lot of scenarios, and I think that's what gives her value. Talking about bad matchups, the two that are absolutely terrible for you are Archdemon Shadow and Top Model Lulika. Archdemon Shadow's S1 provides a seal, which makes it so that your S2 passive no longer works. When Tempest Surin no longer has an S2 passive, thanks to seal, pretty much any damage dealer can kill her in one hit, so she is incredibly vulnerable. A way to counteract this would be to bring a high effect resistance Rowana with Stella Harpa, like we talked about in the teammates section. Top Model Lulika's Soul Burn allows her S1 to guarantee hit twice, which usually translates to 51% times 2 damage to your Tempest Surin, which is an instant kill. You can mitigate this by making sure that you have an Arius holder that also provides a barrier. Better yet, draft 2 so that they can't just outright ban one of them. When it comes to other dicey matchups that people think are really terrible for Tempest Surin, we have things like Researcher Carrot, ML Kawazu, and Little Queen Charlotte. All of these have the ability to one-shot your Tempest Surin, but there are a couple of, rules and restrictions that apply to it, so you might get lucky and not outright lose. I would avoid playing Tempest Surin into these characters, but it is not an outright death sentence like the first two. ML Kawazu and Carrot, if they do more than 31% of your max health in a given S3, you will actually proc your passive before they can detonate the burns on the character, and therefore you will survive. When it comes to Little Queen Charlotte, the splash damage completely ignores your S2 passive. So if you can avoid it, try to ban any attack buffers on the enemy team so that way the splash damage doesn't outright kill you, even if you're in stealth. As for other things you should probably avoid, Elbrus Ritual Sword users are pretty good against you, and depending on the RNG, can actually make your life a living hell. Charles can kill you in one hit. Fighter Maya is very difficult for Tempest Surin to beat in a one-on-one fight to begin with. And then also there's Illanav with a couple of lucky procs can absolutely destroy you as well. So try to avoid bringing Tempest Surin into those scenarios. And then finally, the last thing you should probably avoid is any high frequency AoE heroes such as Seaside Bellona, Red Charlotte, or Holiday Euphine. And that is going to be it for the Tempest Surin guide, guys. Hopefully you guys learned a thing or two, and even if you don't intend to actually build this character, hopefully you have learned how to deal with this character and kind of learned a couple of bad matchups or things that you can use against her, because, yeah, character, like I said in the intro, super annoying to play against. If this video will help out any of your friends or guildmates, as always, please consider sharing it. Enjoy the rest of your day and enjoy the rest of your week, and I will see you guys all in the next one. Later.